And we are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into today's special edition episode, I want to give a shout out to Campfire Coworks. That is where we currently are. They are an office sharing space, and we are having our podcast here. And so make sure to go follow them on Facebook to see if there's any opportunities for you to partner up with Campfire Coworks here in Marquette, Michigan. We're very happy to be here, and we're excited to forward that partnership for years to come. So go show them some love. Also, before we get into today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe because the Revved Up podcast is continuing to grow, and we want it to keep growing and pushing up. So make sure to like and subscribe, and also hit that share button if you want to show some love to some of your friends and family. Without further ado, let's get into this special edition episode. The talk and rumors are heightening of the current head coach position and who's going to be filling it for the Detroit Pistons. And the guy I want to highlight in this episode, we'll talk about other coaches also, but we want to highlight Kevin Ollie because according to James Edwards, he is saying that he is the front runner for the job and to replace Dwayne Casey. And he's a guy that won a national championship at UConn in 2014, has quite the resume as far as playing with lots of different NBA teams, 12 different teams in 13 seasons, something like that. What are some of your first thoughts on Kevin Ollie? Do you think he's a good fit? Do you think, where's your head at as far as Kevin Ollie?
So for me, he has the resume. He has a national title at the college level, which is hard to do, especially given the tournament and March Madness history. UConn is a prestigious program, one of the blue bloods in college basketball for sure. He initially came on after playing and coached with UConn as an assistant under the great Jim Calhoun, who he is by far one of the better coaches in all of college basketball history. And so the resume really speaks for himself in terms of who he's coached under and when the caliber of players he's coached. But then when you look at where he's played, he was a point guard, went undrafted in 1995. And as a player, granted, he did play for a crap ton of teams. He did play the longest with the 76ers in 3 different stints. But he was just all over the place. He never really stuck. He was one of those guys that was an average NBA player, nothing spectacular. He got moved a lot. He was just one of those pieces where it's like, he can play. He can't play. He's just an NBA player.
Yeah, he was the guy that got included in a lot of trades. That's pretty much
who
the
he
way
was.
It was.
But that doesn't take away from a great player he was, because at UConn he was a great player. And so being under Jim Calhoun and everything, Jim Calhoun, I love him. He is by far one of the greater coaches in college basketball history, like I said, but he's also one of the best coaches in UConn basketball history, which is saying a lot because they've had so many great coaches there. But fast forward, he was there from 2010 to 2012 as an assistant. And then as soon as Calhoun stepped down and retired, then they hired and promoted Kevin Ollie to head coach. And he was there from 2012 to 2018. And then in his time there, won a national championship in 2014, only his second year with the team as a head coach. And they were just consistently good. But then 2018 hit, and that's when they fired him. They fired him. He was charged with a failure to monitor his program, not promoting an atmosphere of compliance. Connecticut also lost 1 scholarship for the 2019-20 class, was put on 2 years probation, was fined $5,000, and various minor recruiting restrictions. And they also had to vacate victories in which an ineligible player participated during the 2016-17 and 2017-18 season. And Ollie was charged with 3 level 1 violations stemming from the following: summer pickup games that should have counted toward allowable team activities, a video coordinator engaging in impermissible coaching instruction, and a booster providing extra benefits to the student athletes, and just a whole list of things.
Right.
And so outside of that, I will say a notable player he's had coached is Kemba Walker, Jeremy Lamb, our guy Andre Drummond, Shabazz Napier, and then with Overtime Elite as a head of coaching and player development, Amen Thompson and Asur Thompson, the brothers, the twins that are supposed to be very high picks in this upcoming draft.
Right.
And Dominic Barlow, who is currently in the G League with the San Antonio Spurs. But my thing with Kevin Ollie is his resume speaks for himself. If he wasn't fired by UConn, I'd be like, hire the dude. But because he was fired and because he violated so many things within the NCAA, for me, you can be a great coach, but a bad person. And I'm not saying he's a bad person, but his character for me is in question. Everybody out there, Pistons fans everywhere, are going like, hire Kevin Ollie. He's won a national championship. He's done all these great things. But you also have to look at the bad things he's done, because there's a laundry list here.
And the thing with the Pistons head coach position is we're coming off a guy like Dwayne Casey, where he is a great guy. You can just tell that he's a guy of morals, that he's setting a good tone in the locker room and in the practice, and that the guys respect him. And like you're saying, the morals and the shenanigans behind the scenes with Kevin Ollie is at question right now. And if we did go to a guy like Kevin Ollie, that's a total flip from a Dwayne Casey organization.
And the scarier thing for me in this situation is that it was college. It wasn't anything like, it wasn't high school. High school would have made it worse, in my opinion. But it wasn't anything pro related. It was college. And those guys, if you look at our roster, they're pretty much college basketball players still. Like, they're all very young. And so when you have very young players and a coach who has this history of making that bad decision from a very long period of time, that's why it scares me, is because he did this with a prestigious blue blood basketball program in college basketball history. And yeah, of course he did get in a lot of trouble for it. But it's just like, he did this with a bunch of kids. And so our roster right now is pretty much a bunch of kids. Yes, they are the same age as us, pretty much. We are kids still, even though we're in our 20s. But still, it's just scary to me that he could. It's scary because he did this with people our age, and our team is our age.
Right.
And so that's why it scares me. Otherwise, his resume speaks for itself. Like, he's coached so many NBA talented players. He's been under Jim Calhoun, which is one of the greater coaches of all time. He's won a national championship, which is hard to do.
Oh, so hard.
So, like, he has the resume, but it's just his character for me is in question.
He ended his career with the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2009 and 2010. Towards the end of his career, when earning roster spots, he really emerged as like a mentor type player who really kind of took guys under his wing during practices and on the bench, and how to be a pro's pro. And he mentored young stars like Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden late in his career. What does it mean to have experience around those talented players for guys like Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, to know that Kevin has worked closely with those superstar level players? What does it mean for those guys?
You get valuable life lessons that you can learn. Like, look at so many past teammates of Kobe, like Pau Gasol there. Like, just the fact that he was an all-star game coach for the young players this past year, like, all those players going in under him got to learn behind the scenes stories that some people will never even hear about. And so when you're able to make that connection with a high caliber player in like a LeBron James, an Allen Iverson, a Russell Westbrook, a Kevin Durant, guys that are or have been generational talents in today's NBA.
Yeah.
It's just, when you have that experience and those stories that can really connect you to them, that's like, okay, I can play in this league.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not that much different than us, other than LeBron is one of the better players of NBA history.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not that much different than us. Like an AI is kind of like a Jaden Ivey. They're both explosive players. They can do a ton of different things defensively. They can contribute so many different things in so many aspects of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you like Russell Westbrook, Jaden Ivey too, because they're both explosive again. And even AI can fall into the mix of a Cade Cunningham because of the basketball IQ.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many different things that all these young guys can definitely learn from an experienced player who played 13 years in the league, which is a long time
Mm-hmm.
for just a pro's pro. But just the life lessons that you can learn and the connections that are made there, it goes a long way.
What's kind of interesting for me too is being able for a guy like Kevin Ollie to rub shoulders with big names like that with AI, and it would be cool to know that, to see that if we did hire Kevin, if he was able to bring in some of those guys and be like, just for a couple days or something, have AI come and practice with the team, and even just sit down with them and break bread and talk, and maybe sit on the plane and just kind of have our young guys that have that superstar look, like they could become superstars, just to kind of be rubbing shoulders with former players that Kevin Ollie can kind of connect them with, and kind of ask questions, and just kind of be in that the same air as these former superstars. I think that would be a cool opportunity for our young guys to kind of get. We talked about Kevin Ollie a little bit. There's so many other prospects that are being talked about and rumored. And for me, guys like Brian Keefe, Rex Kalamian is probably the one that I'm favorited to compared to some of the others. Like Brian Keefe, I'm not really excited about. When we were talking about the IM guy that got hired by the Houston Rockets, I wasn't really high on him. It makes me just that much more excited about the hope to get a guy like Jerry Stackhouse. He hasn't been talked about at all, which is so frustrating, because it's like all these other guys like Charles Lee will talk, like I'm just not super excited about like getting him. Like all these names that are getting thrown around, no one's really been like, let's do it, go get him, except Jerry Stackhouse. So for me, like a guy like Charles Lee, his odds of us actually hiring him have kind of gone down.
Yeah. So most recently, we had Mike Budenholzer get fired by the Milwaukee Bucks.
Wild move, by the way.
Which was wild.
Whoa.
And this is me taking a jab at the Bucks. Just because Budenholzer is one of the better NBA coaches out there currently. He's a great coach, and a great guy too. Just an overall genuine person that you love to be around. And what they did to him was kind of like a jerk move, because yes, he did make some questionable in-game adjustments during the series against the Miami Heat there. A lot of questionable things. But what was failed to report on just came out was that during that series, his brother got into a car accident and died. So, Bood, I'm sorry for your loss. That's tough. But that's why I feel like it's a kind of a jerk move, because how are you supposed to coach in a crucial series when your brother literally just died?
Right.
And so you can understand how Budenholzer might have not been there. And so I just want to give Budenholzer a shout out, because man, I'm sorry. You just lost your brother, and then you just lost your job within the same week pretty much. And that's just tough.
Yeah.
And so,
and a coach that got you a championship.
Yeah, a championship. But the reason why we bring that up too is because Charles Lee, who is the head assistant coach there in Milwaukee, has been listed as one of the 3 finalists for the Pistons' current job. And I'm very high on him. Hudson is not, but I am. And the reason why I think he may not be our coach is just because Budenholzer got fired. Because Milwaukee, historically speaking, has hired within their program that they've created. And I would not be shocked at all if Charles Lee got hired there over the Pistons.
Right.
And honestly, we could be hearing within the next couple days, honestly, which I'm sure if Charles Lee gets offered the job and gets hired there, then it really brings us down to Kevin Ollie and Jaren Collins. Jaren Collins we'll talk about in a minute here, but Charles Lee, his resume.
Okay, let's get into it.
He played college basketball at Bucknell, which is in Pennsylvania, for those of you wondering, because a lot of people don't know what Bucknell is. It is a college in Pennsylvania. He played there from 2002 to 2006. In his time there, he was a two-time captain, Conference Player of the Year in 2006. Went undrafted in 2006. He was a shooting guard. As a player, I can't even pronounce half these names, so I'm not going to say them, but he did play overseas. As a coach, he was an assistant at Bucknell from 2012 to 2014, and then made the jump to the NBA, which is a big jump to make as a coach early on in your career.
Sure.
Especially on just under 2 years coaching.
Yeah.
But made the jump with the Atlanta Hawks with Budenholzer in Atlanta from 2014 to 2018, and then followed him to Milwaukee from 2018 till now.
Okay.
And the coaching tree, so under Bucknell, he was under Dave Paulson, which majority of people do have absolutely no idea who he is. But he's a solid coach. I looked it up. He's a solid coach.
Okay.
And then, of course, with Atlanta, Milwaukee, Budenholzer. Notable players coached at Bucknell, Mike Muscala.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
He is the only Bucknell player to ever play in the NBA and to ever get drafted in the NBA.
That's cool.
And I want to point out, Charles Lee's first stop in Atlanta, who did he coach? Mike Muscala.
Yeah, right. He was
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But in Atlanta, you have Elton Brand, Al Horford, Kyle Korver, Paul Millsap, Mike Muscala, Dennis Schroeder, Jeff Teague, Tim Hardaway Jr., Kirk Heinrich, Chris Humphries, Thavos Avalosha, Diago Splitter, Mike Dunleavy, Dwight Howard. Granted, at that point, Dwight Howard was questionable. Kent Bazemore and John Collins. He's coached a lot of great caliber players.
Yeah.
And so that's just Atlanta. Milwaukee, obviously, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who, in my opinion, is a generational talent and is one of the best players in NBA history.
For sure.
Malcolm Brogdon, Pau Gasol, George Hill, Brooke Lopez, Chris Middleton, Robin Lopez, Jeff Teague again, DeMarcus Cousins, Drew Holiday, Serge Ibaka, Jay Crowder, Goran Dragic.
Right.
The list goes on.
Yeah. So
he has coached a lot of good, solid NBA players.
Mm-hmm.
And what stands out to me is he coached Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard gets often compared to who? Jalen Duren.
Mm-hmm.
That's an often comparison. Then you have even Milwaukee coaching a generational talent. What is that like? Mm-hmm. What is that like? And so honestly, it's a weird comparison, but you could compare Cade to Giannis.
Right.
Just in the generational talent comparison.
Yep.
And so he's been under great coaches. He's been under and coached great players. And so that's why he really sticks out to me. And what does Milwaukee promote? They promote defense.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they promote.
Huge.
That's their big thing, is just defense. And so imagine a defensive coach coming in, because historically speaking, recent years, we've had offensive-minded coaches because Dwayne Casey he's more balanced than one side or another. But just having a defensive coach come in, work with guys like Killian Hayes, who could unlock that even further of his potential.
Right.
Like Jaden Ivey, Cade, Jalen Duren, even who we just talked about in our upcoming episode of Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley going forward. There's these characteristics that could get unlocked if we were to hire him.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about Charles Lee, Kevin Ollie, who right now, in your opinion, has the upper edge, and who would you prefer?
So right now, I would prefer Charles Lee.
Okay.
And that is just because of how promising he is already in his career. Mm-hmm. A very young coaching career, that is. He's really just been coaching since 2012, which isn't that long ago. And the fact of he's coached some very, very solid NBA caliber players for a long time now. Mm-hmm. Has worked with generational talents in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Granted, Kevin Ollie, what he has going for him is he was the kind of guy to develop guys like Andre Drummond, Kemba Walker, Jeremy Lamb, Shabazz Napier, who have all been solid NBA players. And overtime elite, he's helped develop Amen Thompson and Nasur Thompson. Granted, we haven't seen what they've done at the NBA level because they still need to be drafted, but they're supposed to be high top-tier picks. But it's just the experience level is what comes into it, and the character comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of a guy like Charles Lee and how many good caliber players he's coached puts him on a whole new platform.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Ollie with the character issues drops him down.
Right.
Because if you didn't have those character issues, it'd be neck and neck between the two for me. Because you have two great coaches. Obviously, they know what they're doing. They can develop guys. But it's just the character issues for Kevin Ollie brings him down.
For me, it's all about winning.
Yeah.
And when you look at both of these guys, they've done a lot of winning
Yeah.
in their coaching careers. Kevin Ollie with the national championship in 2014, Charles Lee with an NBA championship, being able to hoist up the Larry O'Brien trophy with the Milwaukee Bucks. We saw Kevin Ollie in his 6 years with UConn go 127 wins and 79 losses. I really like that ratio. I'm not exactly what Charles Lee is at, but I'm sure it's pretty high. And that's why I like these two candidates, because of that winning aspect. These guys have been around winning teams. That's what it's so crucial to know what that culture looks like. Mike Budenholzer has a winning culture around his name, just with his time with Atlanta and now his championship with the Milwaukee Bucks. That's another reason why I'm so shocked he was fired.
Yep.
But then Kevin Ollie, with Calhoun and the UConn school and just what they're known for, and just winning national championships and having great caliber players. That's why I think either of these decisions, there's a little bit more of a risk with Kevin Ollie, like you were saying, with the morale issues and the behind the scenes issues. That's why, Charles Lee, I don't dislike him. It's just he just doesn't do much for me. I watched a couple of interviews. I'm just like, he didn't win me over. That's and that's just a personality thing. That's not necessarily a coaching issue. So I'd be excited to see what Charles Lee would do. One, because he's a little bit younger, and I like that younger perspective for our younger team. And Kevin Ollie, the coaching overtime elite doesn't really impress me, to be honest.
He hasn't actually coached overtime elite. He's the head of coaching and player development.
Okay.
So he's hired the coaches to coach those teams, and he's recruited, per se, bringing in these guys that have been playing there. And he's been a key contributor in building to what it is now. And so that's why it's impressive to me, is because he kind of learned his lessons a little bit and is now a player development role and is really developing guys. So that's why you could be like, okay, he has learned his lesson. He's ready to make that jump again. But it's also like he hasn't been coaching since 2018. Like, that's a while to not be coaching. Right. Yeah, you can be a great coach and have a national championship, but then to not coach the game for that long stretch of time. And the game has changed a lot since 2018. Like, the three is just more relevant in today's game. So that's why it's much different than what it was then. And so that's why when you take some time away from the game, and you're on the sidelines developing these guys, it's still different because you haven't been coaching that entire time. But Charles Lee has. And so that brings us to the third and final finalist that has been reported, and that is Jarron Collins.
Right.
In his resume, he played college basketball at Stanford from 1997 to 2001.
Which Stanford, very prestigious, hard to get into.
Yes, very hard to get into. I mean, you're crazy smart. He was the only player out of our three finalists that has been drafted.
Okay. He
was in the 2001 NBA draft, round 2, pick 52. Granted, he was in the second round,
late,
but he was still drafted. He's a center, which that's the intriguing thing for me, is because you look at our roster, we're very big heavy now.
Yeah.
And so the development of a James Wiseman, with Jalen Duren, and obviously Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley, to me, that's exciting. As a player, he was drafted by the Utah Jazz, played there from 2001 to 2009, then with Phoenix from 2009 to 2010, and then half a season with the Clippers, half a season with Portland in his final year. As a coach, and he started in 2014 to 2021 as an assistant with the Golden State Warriors. And in that time, obviously won 3 championships. And then from 2021 to now, he's been an assistant with the Pelicans. And honestly, from learning more about him recently, I honestly might throw him above Charles Lee.
Okay, I was just
And
going to
that's
ask that.
just because of the coaching tree he's come out of. Because look at the coaches that have come out of a Steve Kerr coaching tree. You have Mike Brown in Sacramento. What happened this year? Sacramento, oh
Big
my
leap.
goodness, they took a leap.
Yeah.
Mike Brown, I love you. You are one of my favorite coaches to watch right now.
Yeah.
Just your personality and your coaching, it just,
Yeah, he's got a big personality.
I love it.
It's fun.
And then you look at Willie Green as an example. Willie Green, Michigan native, we love you.
Mhm.
But just what he's done, been able to do in just 2 short years with the Pelicans,
Right.
is Stan Van Gundy, who we hate. He came in, immediately got fired from the Pelicans because they saw how much worth and value you had. You had nothing. But
Zion Williamson was like, "Get him out of here.
We don't want you. You suck." But they saw that initially, which is smart on them. They saw how dumb he is. But Willie Green comes in, has a roster where he really needs to work with these guys. Zion Williamson has not been healthy. They really need to develop a bunch of these guys to actually be anything special. Mid-season, in his first year, they acquire C.J. McCollum. That was a great addition.
Mhm.
C.J. McCollum is one of the better wings in the NBA today, one of the better shooters in the league today. And just what he's done this past season was like, wow, Willie Green, you turned them around fast. And it's not like he's had NBA coaching, like head coaching experience prior to his job here with the Pelicans.
Right.
He's only a second-year coach, and he developed them into a strong Western Conference team. Mike Brown turned to Sacramento, which hadn't made the playoffs in almost a decade, really.
Right.
And they made them into who they are now with lighting the beam and everything. Like,
winning culture.
Yeah, all these coaches that have come out of a Steve Kerr program have had immediate success and have had just a good response to what they've been trying to promote. And so you look at notable players in his time in Golden State, Leandro Barbosa, Harrison Barnes, Andrew Bogut, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, David Lee, Sean Livingston, Maurice Spates, Klay Thompson, Kayvon Looney, Anderson Varejao, Kevin Durant, Matt Barnes, JaVale McGee, fellow Michigan native, we love you. Just the list goes on. There's so many guys. And there's one guy in particular that intrigues me the most. James Wiseman.
Right.
So he was there when they drafted him. He knows what it takes to unlock his game.
Yep.
And so just bringing him in immediately, he's going to focus very hard on James Wiseman and his development. Obviously, he's going to focus on Jalen Duren and Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and all these other guys. But the fact that he has that connection early on with a guy like James Wiseman, who's still very young and has a high ceiling, that's just impressive.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. And they probably worked closely together while they were in Golden State because of Jerron Collins being a center, like you were saying, a big man. What I like about those three guys we've talked about is they're all coming from winning culture. I mentioned it before. That's really cool how all these guys have won some hardware from their perspective leagues and teams. And I think that's very impressive. And I think that's what the Pistons need. You know, Dwayne Casey kind of had that, you know, with losing in an Eastern Conference Finals, I believe, in 2017, 2018, and then coming to the Pistons. So he was kind of around that winning culture. But each three of these guys, these prospects of who we might pick up, are all coming from direct winning teams that are proven to be around a winning culture for multiple years. And I love that because that's what the Pistons need to develop after a nearly 20-year drought of losing. We need to switch that culture up. That's immediately what Cade has talked about when he got drafted. That's what Killian, Isaiah, and Sadiq at the time, and Jaden and Jalen, all these newer guys, our young core have talked about how we need to change this losing organization into a winning culture. And that switch needs to be made. And I think that final flip of the switch happens when we hire this next coach of developing that winning culture. And that's exciting. So very exciting.
So who's your favorite out of these three?
You know, I'm not super excited about any of them. I'm happy about the winning culture. I like that. I want a guy with not a big personality. I want a guy that's a little bit kind of like a Dwayne Casey-esque presence, where he's a little bit quiet. He can hold a conversation, gives good interviews, but not all over the place. I think it's important for our young guys to have a calming presence. So that kind of takes away Kevin Ollie for me.
Yep.
After you breaking down Jerron Collins, I really like Collins. I think he kind of impresses me. I like that he's a big man. There's not a lot of big men coaches. I like that. It's typically the point guard position, so I think it would be cool to have that perspective. So I think Collins kind of has the upper edge, which that's not who I would have thought I picked at the beginning of the episode. So you guys comment below on, out of those three guys, who you would prefer, because my opinion was switched. Ryan made it happen. He helped me out and informed me on what coach I would like. But I think in the end, those three guys, if that's truly who it's down to, I don't think there's a terrible decision at this point. I think all three of those guys would be a fair choice. And I think that, in the coming years, we could decide if it was a flop or not. It's kind of hard. It's early right now. But even the experience, Kevin Ollie kind of being out of the direct coaching a team, he's been out of it for the last 5 years. I don't really like that. I like how Charles Lee and Jerron and Collins are in the mix right now in today's NBA. Even Kevin Ollie's in the Ignite, which is a step below. Not used to that NBA speed. It can be different. It can catch you off guard. So Charles Lee and Collins, they're in it. And they've been in that grind, and they've been making deep playoff runs, and they know what that looks like, and they know what that grind is like, and I really, really love that.
Yeah, because going in, Charles Lee, I'm like, okay, I actually want him. But then after evaluating who Jaren Collins is, it's like, wow. It's like Steve Kerr was one of the greatest coaches of NBA history, in my opinion. That's kind of a bold take. I'm not saying he's the best. I'm not saying he's in the top 10. He's just up there. He's one of the solid NBA coaches out there. But the fact that he's been under that tree in recent years, you have Mike Brown now, you have Willie Green, all these coaches coming out of there having a ton of success. It just shows you how good of a coach he is if multiple assistants of his are having success.
Right.
And look at even Kenny Atkinson. Kenny Atkinson was the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. As soon as the guy that I don't really like in Kyrie Irving got there, he was like, I don't like him, fire him. They fired him. They listened, which was a mistake because obviously they lost with them. But Kenny Atkinson joins Golden State and is an assistant. And the thing is, last year he was a head coaching candidate for the Charlotte Hornets and turned down that job to stay as an assistant with the Warriors.
Must mean something.
But that just speaks highly of how good and how just overall how great of a coach and person Steve Kerr is, that he's developed this strong connection there where he's had multiple guys come out and have success. And not even just coaches. Look at the players he's developed. He's helped develop Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Harrison Barnes, all of these games, like Jordan Poole even. There's just so many different guys that they've been around and have developed that Jaren Collins is now my favorite, because even look at New Orleans, like Jose Alvarado, Devontae Graham, Josh Hart, Jackson Hayes, Brandon Ingram, Herbert Jones, C.J. McCollum, Trey Murphy, Larry Nance Jr., Zion. I'm not high on Zion, but it is Zion. But still, the point is, he's had a roster where he's been around some older vet guys and have gotten a lot out of them and has learned more valuable lessons about that. And then took that with Willie Green to New Orleans and is now coaching all these younger guys that need time to develop, that are kind of in a current situation like the Pistons are in right now. And that just is if he can make a jump and have success as an assistant with the Warriors, who have all these loaded vets, and then you go to a team that isn't loaded with a ton of talent. Well, it is loaded with a ton of talent, rather, but not experience, and turns little experience into a playoff caliber team instantly. That puts him above Charles Lee.
Right.
Because, Charles Lee and Mike Budenholzer are great coaches, but it took a while for Milwaukee to even be really a true contender. And their team the last couple of years is just vets. There's no young guys outside of Marjon Beauchamp and he's not even that special.
Mm-hmm.
He has a high ceiling still, but it's not like anything exciting.
Right.
But it's just like the experience that he has with coaching vets and coaching young guys that really sits him atop.
Well, you guys heard it here first. We talked about the rumored last 3 guys that are up for the job to replace Dwayne Casey as the Detroit Pistons head coach. Comment below who you prefer, because then we can kind of see where the community's at, where if you like Kevin Ollie, if you like Charles Lee or Collins, let us know in the comments below, because we always like to see your guys' perspective and opinions. Make sure to like and subscribe. We are very excited to bring you this special edition episode during the week, and we will see you guys Saturday in the next episode. Peace.